Hey, welcome back everyone. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing a sample lesson from my newest course, Drawing Stylized Anatomy. So in this one, I'm going to show you how to break down some simplified shapes for the body and talk a little bit about how you can practice that and again, make it easier for you to draw some of this stuff. So let's jump on in and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so now hopefully you've had plenty of time to draw lots of basic primitives, and really try a variation, triangles, pyramids, and all sorts of stuff. Just play around with all the basic primitives you can. But now let's also think about how we can wrap those around forms, because this is what happens generally when we move to the next step of thinking about some sort of anatomy. So we get pretty good at maybe drawing a body, and I'm going to skip over, but I'll come back to it. I'm going to say we've got some gesture of the body. Okay, so the body's like this. So I'm skipping over how it would get to a torso like that. But again, I'll come back to more gesture. And you've got a leg back here, a leg up here. And I'm just going to draw this in rather quickly to get to the point I want to make about how to look at other shapes over top of this. So when I'm doing this, I'm actually thinking a lot about silhouettes. And that takes some practice to do. But it can be a fast way to draw characters. And I'm also, again, thinking about the gesture. So I'm trying to get that curvature of the spine, this slope right here. So this and this to me is more the gesture. And even the arm, I try to get a rhythm of the arm like that, so it's not so straight and stacked. Nothing worse than seeing a shoulder, upper arm, forearm. Now, as we mentioned, that was in the previous step of how you would do it. You wouldn't stay there. Okay, that's an initial start to start getting a sense of perspective going so that you can maneuver these shapes and forms in a kind of 3D space in your mind. But you have to remember that the shoulder connects around the upper arm, and the forearm protrudes out from the upper arm. And we'll get more into this as well, but they're not stacked. They're, if anything, there's kind of a back and forth, almost like a zigzag that goes there, but just not stacked. So with this, we get this basic pose going, right? Something like this, we'll say. As you look at this, there's a lot of shapes going on here that wouldn't just be basic cylinders, even at this stage. And I haven't even really started refining and placing a lot of anatomy. Got a little bit kind of hinted in there with the silhouette drawing, but it's not, there's going to be more and more of that as I refine it. Well, let's get enough of this in here where you can make it out. Let's say we get to about right here and like, okay, we want to start refining this. But up until this point, the shapes I've been doing are just, cylinders and cubes. How do I even process and do something like this and get it to look more natural? Well, what I would say is that when you go to do this, let's zero in on this leg. So at first you're thinking like this, okay? You got a cylinder, you got a circle, you got a tapered cylinder. You're getting a little more advanced, so you're not drawing your cylinders like this anymore. Can you see the difference? One just has a little bit of curve to the outsides, and the other one's more solid and flat. This is okay to start there, but eventually you're going to get to here where you start to bend them a little bit more. Remember, everything's a ball of clay, and all of this is malleable. All this is something that you can twist and contort and move on the screen any way you want. The more you start to think that way, the more your imagination kind of opens up. Okay, so let's go back to here. And so now you're at this point, you're starting to get a little bit more curves. You're starting to think a little bit more about silhouette drawing as you do this, but you're not quite sure how you would build other forms onto these forms. Well, the way that you do that is you have to think about these as two ways really. One is individual forms. So a muscle that goes to the leg might look something like this. Right? You might have another segmentation or noticeable mark to the leg right about there. And you might have another one that comes down and back, something like that, right? So the trick is, what am I envisioning right here? And I can say, well, I know that's the vastus medialis, right? And to me, that's the right shape. It might not be. It might be a little bit more like this. Remember, we're stylizing this, we're being imaginative, we're having fun with it. It's not always going to be exactly the way it is. The main thing is that I come up with a simplified shape and form that I can envision and I can throw in there anytime I want. So what I like to do, say it's the calf muscle. To me, the calf muscle looks like this. It's a bit of a diamond, like it's a, there it looks like a spearhead, but it's a bit of a diamond-like shape. And so that's how I draw it. This is what I envision when I get to the calf muscle. Now, obviously, I'm not drawing it as segmented as you would see it right here, but to me, it's a simple shape. And the more I can do that, the more I can get through an entire figure doing that, the easier things are for me. There's another muscle. I don't know if it's a soleus. I think it is. I'm not going to get into naming every muscle here because I'll slaughter some of them, but I got to usually be looking at my reference sheets to get it all right. But let's say it's, this muscle right here. To me, it's that shape. And on that goes. Now, again, this isn't going to be the end result, or I'm going to get somebody that looks very mechanical, very virtual reality, bad virtual reality graphics from the 80s. I don't know. It's just going to look really weird, right? But it's a great way to think about it. And so the knee. So here's another quick example. Let me zoom in here and show you something I think is kind of worth mentioning. So if we bring the knee out like this, we say, well, to me, this is my simple knee. It's a triangle right there. And then that's fine, and that's better than nothing. But then at some point, you'll probably get to where you keep paying attention to knee illustrations or the body in general, and you say, you know what, there's a little angle right there. So you go from basically this at first, which is better than a lot of people, really. They won't even just, I don't know, it's like the knees, like something where people try to do this, and they do some weird thing, and it turns into a lumpy looking elbow or something. But I would say in this case, it's better to simplify. And then eventually, as you kind of develop your knowledge on it, like, your next simplification would be this. And then your next one, and I'm just speaking from my own experience, we're all going to have a different roadmap to how we start to perceive the human body, I think anyways. But then your next one would be like this, and you go, you know what, there's always this little bump right there under the knee. But you see how even this is really just a process of what I thought about the knee initially is, there's an angle there. Oh, no, it's an angle, and the kneecap actually points up more. And you start to learn this as you do anatomy breakdowns, and you look at where the tendons go and all this and that. And then you realize, oh, no, there's some like bony protrusions right there. And at first you're drawing the leg maybe completely straight back like that, the kind of shin area. And then all of a sudden you're like, no, you know what? It seems like from most views that I see, it bends out a little bit right there. And on that process goes. It's really just developing a memory of what you see, and then also what you adopt as being right for your style. So let's go back to this, and I'll just do another quick version right through here, because again, I think this is something you have to practice. But now we're talking about the vastus lateralis. To me, it's this kind of shape. And you got the hamstrings on the back. You always see a little bit of a pull this way, or it could be the other way. It might be, I think it'd be this way down. And then you've got some muscles here. You got the glute here. This I always kind of bring up like this. And this might, you got an iliotibial tract in here, but I usually do I think it's a shorter version of that. Let me bring that up a little higher. Something like this. the rectus femoris here. So again, this is kind of my simplified version of the side of the leg. And it's going to be a little different for all of us. Like you might look at that, oh, that doesn't look right, Rob. And that's fine. That's where stylized drawings are okay, because we have to make our own distinctions. So again, calf muscle like this. And on the outside, I think it goes more like this. Little bony protrusion right there. Down to the foot here. Toes, I'll just do a boot kind of version here. Ankle here. Something like that. And sometimes less is better, so I'd probably stop it there. Now you have to remember too, when you start to shadow and shade and develop things, you're not going to use every segmentation, every bit of that. But and if you need more, that's when you take your basic version of what you considered your style and your memory of it, and then you go to some source material. Pinterest is great. I've got about 4 anatomy books that I rely on at any given time, medical anatomy, and then some that are illustrative anatomy. Bern Hogarth is one of my favorites. So again, this is my stylized version. Now, here's the other thing. I love looking at other artists and seeing how they interpret it. And I suggest you do that with my work, but then also you have to always table that with your own research and development, okay? So you're going to hear people say, don't copy other artists because you'll copy their mistakes. I don't wholeheartedly believe in that. If they're better and they've done their due diligence and you can see that in their work, by all means, learn from them, grow from them. Never trust one source. I don't care if it's a book. I don't care if it's an artist, a mentor. You want to be a advocate for your own knowledge. You want to go out there and like really just research and add bits and pieces into your own development. Okay. So again, we could continue on with this, but hopefully you get the idea. What I want you to practice here is not just the anatomy shapes I've shown you here, but I also want you to think about these other shapes now, because we're going to need these as we progress. And so you're going to take the shapes I showed you in the previous lesson, and you're just going to draw some things that look a little more like this. Nope, that was pretty bad. Let me try that again. I have a hard time going left to right on the screen. I should really rotate it. But see how this gives you a nice dimensional feeling, and it's also got some curvature in there. So now what you're doing is you're incorporating, again, the previous step with this step where you're getting more of a sense of dimension. And this works great for anatomy because you have to kind of imagine that all these muscles are dimensional strips of clay, we'll say, bands or clay or strips. I don't know how to how to really make that sound for you, but they're malleable. They have contours. Some are thick, some are thin. Lots of muscle groups, in the body, and you need that variation. You need some that appear strong and bulge out, and then you need some that are like little bands and little tiny strips. So you're going to have to practice thinking of shapes like this. So maybe it goes back like that. Maybe it tapers together. It gets thinner. All right, so see how it starts thicker there, gets thinner there. Then maybe you have another one right by it. A lot of times muscles will converge in a similar area, right? So you do something like that. Again, these little lines are basically like wrapping lines. So when we get into drawing the anatomy specifically more and more, I'll explain it further. But what you're trying to do is think about developing these shapes in a way where you can, it's almost like you're trying to see everything as a basic shape, a basic series of shapes and forms that you can maneuver. Okay? Again, I'll just keep relating it back to trying to get your artwork to become this malleable ball of clay on this white canvas that can sometimes be daunting. But if you go back to thinking of it as all these potentials for basic shapes, all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier to process, because now you can just move these shapes around. They're not so intimidating. You know, it's not like that's right, but I can, since I can understand each one of these shapes, I can maneuver them. I can nudge one around. I can grab this piece of the puzzle and slide it over there. So that'll be it for this particular lesson. Hopefully that's informative for you. Let's head on to the next lesson and see what we come up with.